Hi, I'm Joanna Valsemis, Director of Knowledge Mobilization at Canada's Stem Cell Network, and your host of Stem Cells from the Sofa. In this unique series, I sit down with some of the brightest minds in the field. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bernard Thébaud, neonatologist at the Ottawa Hospital and CHEO, senior scientist at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute and CHEO Institute, and professor at the University of Ottawa. His work focuses on bronchopulmonary dysplasia, a chronic lung disease in preterm infants. Dr. Thébaud is also the Associate Scientific Director of the Stem Cell Network and serves on our board of directors. Thank you for joining us today, Bernard. Can you tell us a little bit about bronchopulmonary dysplasia and your clinical trial?
Yeah, so bronchopulmonary dysplasia is a lung disease in preterm infants. So these are babies that are born too early, up to 12 or 14 weeks too early. And their main problem at birth is that the lungs is not fully developed and they have trouble breathing. And to keep them alive, we intubate them, give them additional oxygen and mechanical artificial ventilation. And while this keeps them alive, at the same time, it damages their lungs. And so this eventually can lead to a chronic lung disease that we call bronchopulmonary dysplasia or BPD. And it's the most common complication of preterm birth, and it's also associated with brain injury and can be associated with blindness. This disease has been described over 50 years ago, and it is still a problem because we don't have a good treatment for BPD. And our clinical trial is taking advantage of regenerative medicine and a particular cell therapy that we have developed in the lab. And now we have been able to make the translation from the bench to the bedside. And we are completing a phase 1 trial.
Excellent. Thank you. That's really exciting. For viewers at home that aren't really familiar with clinical trials, could you tell us how they work exactly and how someone can get involved if they're interested in getting involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So clinical trials are critical to make sure that a new therapy is safe and effective. And it's very important to go through those carefully designed clinical trials, and there are different phases of clinical trials. And so a phase 1 trial will enroll only very few people, 10 patients, for example, and again is only there to prove feasibility or and safety. Then, if this phase 1 trial is successful, you move to a phase 2 trial where you have hundreds of patients in which you test again the safety, but also the efficacy of the therapy. And so you have a control group and a treatment group, and then you can compare if the therapy makes a difference. And then the phase 3 trial is the large trial with more than several hundreds of patients, where you want to definitely prove that indeed there is efficacy of this medication. And again, there's only this methodology, this rigorous methodology that allows you ultimately to say whether a treatment is safe and effective in patients. And so to get involved in our trial, the babies are all hospitalized in the neonatal intensive care unit. So they are available in the unit to us. And if they are eligible, we ask parents for consent if they want to participate in the trial. If patients are not hospitalized at home, but they are interested in participating in clinical trials, then usually they go through their GP, who can then guide them to the appropriate physician or center who's doing a clinical trial. And it's important that these clinical trials are registered at clinicaltrials.gov, for example, well designed and performed in academic centers.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We often hear that the timeline for a drug to go from the bench to the bedside is really long. Could you give us an idea of the timeline for that journey?
Yeah, it's way too long. It's 10 to 20 years, and it costs $1 billion. And you don't think about that when you start, obviously. But it takes so long because you have to do the rigorous research in the lab, the discovery in a petri dish, test exploratory studies in vitro cell systems or in laboratory animals, and then ideally go to confirmatory studies in large animal models that are closer to the clinical setting. And these studies are really important because they form the rationale for then embarking into clinical trials that are very expensive and time-consuming. And for these breakthrough therapies that regenerative medicine is bringing to light, you need Health Canada approval. And then performing a clinical trial, a phase 1, takes 6 months to 1 year just to be done. But the preparation time is also long. And then a phase 2 trial typically takes 2 years to be completed, plus probably a year to prepare such a trial. And this explains why the time why it takes so long. The other worry is that the translation often fails. So not all the therapies that appear promising in the lab turn out to be successful therapies that can then be given to patients. And so this is why there are now ways of mitigating the risk of failing the clinical translation. And we have applied this in order to go to our phase 1 trial. And I think it's a new way of making sure that we bring novel therapies faster and with a higher likelihood of success into the clinic.
That's amazing. So you talked about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Could you maybe expand a little bit on what happens between phase 3 when a phase 3 clinical trial ends, and then how we actually get that therapy to the patient?
Yeah, so after a phase 3 trial, you present the data in front of the regulatory agencies, Health Canada in Canada, FDA in the US. And based on these results, a medication can get approved for the indication it was tested for. And that's, if you take only the clinical trials phase, this in itself can take 6 years, 7 years.
Okay. Thank you. So what are the next steps for your research, and what are your hopes for the future?
The next step is to prepare the phase 2 trial, which we're already doing. And we have to apply for funding. A lot of time is spent also to write grants and get the funding to get the trials done. And the phase 2 trial is very expensive. And so this would be a trial where we will have then a placebo group and a treatment group to show that in addition to safety, this cell therapy may also be effective in improving the respiratory outcome of preterm babies. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at 3 years from now to know if this phase 2 trial is a success. But there's overall excitement in our neonatal community because there seems to be finally something that could make a difference for these babies. And this could be a breakthrough in the making.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bernard. The work that you and your team are doing are absolutely incredible. And as you mentioned, you're already impacting patient lives.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Stem Cells from the Sofa. Take a look at other conversations about access and affordability and the creation of therapies.